5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I grew up on Long Island, and as a kid, I would take the Long Island Railroad into New York City quite often. Or just one town over and go to the movies, which was always, it was always fun because as a kid, you tried to avoid the conductor and get away for free.
Oh, gosh.
And when I moved to Florida, I had a friend who would come visit by way of Amtrak. And I would always watch the Amtrak train and hear his stories about the ride. And I always thought to myself, oh my gosh, I got to do that. That just sounds like so much fun. And I will be doing this. I will be taking a train to New York from Florida in November. And, and then Donald Trump is going to kill Amtrak, and that's going to be the end of that. No, I hope not. I hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, so I went to the Smithsonian Institute. I know you did too. One time, long time ago, and I walked into this room full of trains, and I was like, holy cow, I am a geek, aren't I? I'm impressed by this stuff. And I was just in awe of all those trains, everything. So Teddy Wilson is on the phone, and he hosts a show called Mighty Trains. I have a picture on the streaming video we're doing right now of a train that looks like a mighty train. I don't know if that's from his show or not. I Googled it, and that's what came up. He's talking to us about the Smithsonian Channel series Mighty Trains, the very thing he hosts, which premieres Sunday, September 3rd at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Smithsonian Channel. Teddy Wilson, good morning, sir. How are you?
Hey, Larry. Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good. Where are you?
Good. I'm in Toronto, Canada. Actually, I live up in Toronto, so I'm calling from Toronto.
So if Donald Trump kills Amtrak, Canada will still have a railroad. I think I'm going to go up there because you've got a nice thing going on there, don't you?
We're very fortunate. I mean, Amtrak in the States is great. You guys have some amazing trains in the U.S. and up in Canada. We're very fortunate to have Via Rail, which is our version of Amtrak, and we're very lucky. I mean, like you, we're such a big kind of geographically diverse country, so we're really lucky to have a passenger railway that crosses it all. And actually, we actually crossed Canada in our first episode of Mighty Trains. That's, as you said, airing this Sunday. We go across the country, so it was really cool, and it's a fascinating train.
Well, I can tell you how geeky I am when it comes to trains. First of all, I do not own a train set. I don't know. I just don't think I'll take care of it the right way. But I watch, I watch these YouTube videos, like the one you just talked about, that train that goes across Canada. That looks like a beautiful ride.
It really is. I mean, that's, as I said, our first episode, and we go from Vancouver right out on the west coast to Toronto, which is where I live.
Gosh, I'd love to do that.
It's absolutely amazing, and you know it's interesting. I'm Canadian. I'm from Canada, and like a lot of Canadians, or like a lot of Americans as well, you know, I'd been all over my country quite a bit, but I'd never crossed it. I'd never really, gone across it, whether by car or by rail. So this was a first for me to kind of see my own country and really see it in a new light. And it's a 2,800 mile journey. It's 4 nights. It's amazing. It's actually one of the longest train journeys on Earth, and so it's a heck of a way to kick off the series as well. But I had a great time doing it, and there are 5 other really amazing trains in the season that we talk about as well. So yeah, I think whether you're a train geek like you or I, or whether you kind of like the travel show element of it, or whether you're
I like both.
Kind of me too.
So do you focus on the trains or the trips that the trains take, or both?
We really do both. I mean, this franchise, this Mighty franchise, there's a series called Mighty Ships, Mighty Planes, Mighty Cruise Ships. All those air on Smithsonian as well. And this is the first season of Mighty Trains, so it's a new thing. And there is a bit more of a travel element to this particular series. And we also, though, do focus on the trains themselves, because they are really these kind of mighty machines. Often the routes that are taken are real feats of engineering in terms of the different terrain that they have to conquer. And so we focus on the trains. We focus a little bit on the passengers as well, who choose to take these rail journeys. So it's a mix, but it definitely has that kind of Mighty franchise thing, which is focusing on the people who work on the trains, the engineering, and the machines themselves, because they are quite incredible.
I love the fact that you say on the Canadian that hunters and trappers can call ahead from the bush, and then the train will stop so they can come on board with their trappings and things. I mean, it's very it's a very friendly train line.
It really is, and I had heard that. As I said, I had never taken this train before, the Canadian. It's actually the train on our $10 bill up here in Canada too, so it's a real national icon as well.
Really?
But I had been told, I had been told in advance, as you just said, that trappers could stop the train, and of course, as a TV crew on the train, you certainly hope that sort of thing will happen. And in our episode, actually, some trappers stopped the train and they put on a moose. They had been out hunting.
Oh my gosh! Really?
And they had
what season? What time of year? What time of year did you do the trip?
We were on the Canadian in the fall, the late autumn.
Oh, that's got to be beautiful.
October. Yeah, it was. I mean, as a TV crew shooting a show too, it's really great. It makes for great television. But it was also really cool to see that this actually happens, and as you said, like in smaller remote communities, of course, of which there's a lot in Canada, especially out in our prairies and a little further out west. There are these small communities with dozens of people or 100 people, and they can call in ahead and stop the train. So it's quite a service for people as well.
I was watching a YouTube video, Teddy, and there were these college kids, and they wanted a pizza, so they called the pizza place at the next stop, and the pizza guy was waiting for them. So they got off the train, got the pizza.
What?
Yeah, they got the pizza, and then they brought the pizza back onto the train. Now, I'm trying to imagine now. Let's just kind of imagine there's a little kid in the train, and he says, "Hey, Mommy, where'd they get the pizza?" "Oh, they ordered it. They brought it in." And the next stop, here comes the guy with the moose. "Hey, Mommy, that guy must be hungry. He's got a whole moose." That's crazy.
Nothing goes better on pizza like moose.
So what?
That's really well, that never happened to us. I never saw a pizza delivered. That's the first I've heard of that. That's cool.
Do you know what I'm fascinated by is the ingenuity, the engineering or whatever, to go through rocks and mountains, because your rail line goes right through the Canadian Rockies, right?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, as with so many of these rail lines, they were built, 100 years ago or more, the original lines. And you think of what it would be like to burrow tunnels through these mountains or create these massive bridges and viaducts in modern times. But then you think that, I mean, most of these tunnels and bridges were built with people with their bare hands and very simple tools.
Oh my gosh.
Because they were done so long ago. So when I say feat of engineering, I mean, they really are. They would be even in modern times, but when you think about the history of the trains and when these tracks were laid and when they were built, it makes it all the more astounding. And we do in the series as well, we go into the history as well. We also have a train called the Glacier Express that we cover that goes through the Swiss Alps, and same thing. I mean, this is a train that has to go up and over some of the largest mountains on Earth, like the Canadian Rockies as well, and so it's absolutely mind-blowing. And as I say, like if you're like us and you're train geeks, it's great, but also I really do think there's something for a lot of people in this show, even if you love kind of the scenery and the travel element, because it's astounding.
And on the narrative for the Glacier Express, it says it makes a daily 8-hour journey and climbs almost 5 kilometers. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So yeah, over 3 miles, and it goes up and over the Swiss Alps. It runs from the town of Zermatt, which is famous for being at the base of the Matterhorn mountain, and it goes up to the very famous ski city of St. Moritz. You think of that from like the 60s and 70s especially. It was like the ultimate kind of playground of the rich and famous, and that's where the train line ends. But it takes about 250,000 people a year, this train, and it's been in operation. Like large parts of the line have been in operation for more than 125 years. And when I talked a little bit earlier about bridges and tunnels and viaducts, this is kind of the mother of them all worldwide, because it's got almost 300 bridges and almost 100 tunnels that it goes through.
Wow.
One of the tunnels it goes through is more than 6 miles long. So you can imagine being in a train tunnel for 6 miles.
Is this something new for you, or have you always been a train lover? Or when did the train bug bite you?
I think I've been a train fan all my life, and I'm also first and foremost I'm a fan of travel. I love seeing the world, and I always try if I can to do so by train. And I think for me, my love of it started. You talked a little bit about being a train fan all your life, and for me, in the town I grew up in Ottawa, Canada, the capital of Canada, we had a museum called the Museum of Science and Technology, and my mom and dad used to take my brother and I there. And I remember the coolest part for me was always this giant room where they had these huge old diesel and steam locomotives, and you could actually get on them. I'm sure you folks have similar kind of museums down there where they let kids climb on stuff and everything.
The Smithsonian has that. Have you
Yeah.
been to the Smithsonian?
I have, but you know what? Not since I was a kid. But especially now that we're airing on the Smithsonian Channel, I got to get down there.
Yeah, right. Now you're obligated now.
Yeah, which is a pretty cool obligation. But up in Canada at this museum, I remember climbing on those locomotives and just being fascinated. And so I do now when I travel as an adult. I try to always prioritize train travel because I think you guys would agree. There's something about being on a train.
I can't wait to do. I honestly have never done long distance trains. I've only done commuter trains. I'm so looking forward to. In November, we're going to do this. And when we told our friends we were going to do this and family, they said, "A train? Why don't you take a plane? It's 2 hours." and the train I think is 19 hours or something like that. And I thought, no, it's not about getting there. It's it's not about being there. It's getting there, or whatever the destination versus the voyage,
the journey.
The journey. Thank you. Yeah.
You also talk about the commuter train in between Tokyo and Osaka. They have some cool history, yet they're looking toward the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all, I think, kind of colloquially know that term bullet train, and the Shinkansen, as they call it in Japan, Japan Rail's kind of first ever bullet train, was the first one in the world, is an absolute marvel. So it actually crosses the whole country. It goes both north and south and east and west. The line that we focus on for the second episode of Mighty Train, so that'll be airing not this Sunday, but the following Sunday at 9 p.m. on Smithsonian, we focus on this original line called the Tokaido line. So that's the line that was opened in 1964. It's the first bullet train line in Japan, and it does this trip between Tokyo and Osaka, which would take over 5 hours to drive. It does it in 2.5 hours, and it does so because the train travels at over 175 miles per hour.
What do they do?
It's absolutely fascinating.
I mean, do they just slaughter the cows if there's a cow on the track, or what do they?
The cows are very fast in Japan, I'm told. Well, this line is really interesting because like up in Canada, for instance, Via Rail, our passenger service, shares the rail line with freight trains, and you see this is a very common thing all over the world. And so you have sidings built into long journeys where one train will have to pull over to let the other pass. It's a very common thing. But in Japan, after World War II, part of their rebuilding after the war was laying this dedicated bullet train line. So no other trains go on the line, and they're kind of, they have giant fences up beside them, and that allows these trains to only stop where they need to stop. And there are also, fascinatingly, not really any crossings on the line. So there's not points where, cars are going by. These are dedicated rail lines for these bullet trains that travel at these astounding speeds. And, the stats around it are amazing, too, because it carries close to 500,000 passengers, over 400,000 passengers every day. You think what a busy and populated and compact country Japan is. You really see evidence of that in this Tokaido Shinkansen line. And it's like just being on a bullet train is so interesting because the scenery is whipping by at speeds that you're not used to seeing scenery go by when you're on land.
For sure.
You're going that fast, and so it takes your brain a second to kind of realize what's happening. But then the other fascinating thing about the bullet train is it's also the smoothest train I've ever been on. There are no bumps. It has this thing called a body incline system where the actual train kind of like moves on the tracks. It moves up as it goes along corners, so you're not being thrown around. Because at those speeds, going around a big corner, you'd be thrown around. But there are no bumps. It's so smooth. It's really incredible. It actually feels a little more like flying than being on a train.
Wow!
Oh my.
Wow! No. So even if Trump kills Amtrak, I still have trains in the world I can go find. Oh, that sounds awesome.
You know what? You've got tons of trains. You've got tons of them.
You talk about the Ghan in Australia. My mom's always wanted to go to the outback in Australia, and this would be a perfect way to take a journey.
Have either of you been to Australia before?
No, never.
No, we spoke to it this morning.
Yeah, we saw a from Australia.
Well, it was my first time there as well, and I think like a lot of people, you associate this kind of historic, kind of almost romance with the outback and with that like incredibly barren terrain. And this train actually crosses Australia. So there's a train that goes across it from west to east. We took the Ghan, which goes from south to north. So at the very bottom of the country is a great city called Adelaide, and this train goes through the outback. They call it the Red Centre, all the way up to Darwin, which is in the tropical north. So very different weather and environment up there, but it crosses the entire country from south to north. It's almost 2,000 miles as a journey, 4 days long, and it takes you right through this outback that I had only kind of seen in movies and read about in books. And the train stops at one point, and they let all the passengers get off, and as the sun is coming up in the outback, you sip coffee and have breakfast sandwiches, and you watch an outback sunrise, and it's amazing. They stop in a town and they let passengers ride camels. It goes to the Catherine Gorge, which is like one of the great wonders of the world. It was, if I sound excited about it, it's because I was so astounded the whole time. And this is a fascinating train as well because it's also the longest regularly running passenger train on Earth. It's almost a kilometer long, or so I guess about 3/4 of a mile long.
Wow.
So we're going to Australia for
wow.
the cruise.
I'm already a fan of your show. I just went to Smithsonian.
Awesome.
I'm a ready-made fan. I'm the kind of guy, and I just went to the website SmithsonianChannel.com, and then there's a place on there. I can actually watch full episodes on the website.
I believe, there are at least long clips, but there may be full episodes up there as well. And there's also just all sorts of information about the show as well. I think the clips are just parts of the episode, but there's all sorts of episodic info up there.
I like the White Pass and Yukon Route Railroad because you can travel in vintage parlor cars. I mean, gosh, this is really amazing.
Parlor cars?
Yeah. This train, I'd never parlor car.
I know.
I want a parlor car.
Those
This was really interesting because I'd never been up to Alaska before. Like a great state that I've always wanted to visit. I love traveling around America as well, but I'd never been up to Alaska. And so this is a train that leaves from Skagway, which is, as you and some of your listeners may know, is a big port for cruise ships. A lot of these Alaskan cruises dock and stop in Skagway, and so it's kind of a tourist boom town. But it's also, of course, got this incredible history with the gold rush going back into the 1800s. And this is kind of the gold rush train. It was this train that was laid during the time where a lot of people were rushing up to the Yukon and Alaska chasing gold. And so it's got this incredible history to it. And a lot of folks who are taking these cruise ships will get off and do day excursions on this train. And this more so than any of the other trains we cover in this first season, it really did feel like a time warp because as you said, it's an old style train. It's a narrow gauge railway, which is a very sought after type of railway for rail fans. They were more common many years ago, and so this is like an old-timey narrow gauge railway, and they have a wonderful tour guides on this train that talk about the history of the region and the gold rush. Like so many of these lines as well, building the railway itself was incredibly treacherous and dangerous work. Often a lot of workers died as these rail lines were being laid, so there's that history there as well. But it's truly fascinating, and I mean the scenery up in the Alaskan mountains is just breathtaking.
Oh my gosh, you got me wanting to go. On the page on the Smithsonian Channel website, the Mighty Trains page has a train. Is that the one in Japan, the bullet train you were just talking about?
That is the one, yeah. If you open the page, that's the bullet train. It's the one that's got the very aerodynamic nose.
It looks like a plane. Yeah, it does look like a plane without wings. Yeah.
Yeah, when you go to the Mighty Trains page at Smithsonian, that's the one. You can see it right there. That's their N700 bullet train, or as they call it, the Shinkansen.
It does make our trains
a wonder.
It makes ours look primitive, doesn't it? It sure does.
It really is the future, and in that second episode as well, where we talk about the bullet train, we also kind of look to the future because the next frontier rail-wise for Japan and for a few other countries as well is maglev, or magnetic levitation. They've got a train in development now that they're hoping to launch in I think it's 2027, but they're currently doing all the research on it, and this would basically double or more the speed of the existing bullet train, which already runs at 175 miles per hour. So that's kind of the next frontier. So we talk about that a bit as well.
Wow.
And these trains also sustain life. You talk about the North Rail Express, and that delivers food.
Yeah, this is the only freight train that we do in this first season, and it was really interesting for me, because I think we all intuitively think of trains as passenger trains, but obviously they're key to commerce and business and industry around the world. And this North Rail Express is not only the fastest freight train in all of Europe, it's also one of the longest freight lines, and it carries largely fresh fish. So this is a train that leaves from the Norwegian Arctic, this tiny town of Narvik, way up in the north, like hundreds of miles north of the Arctic Circle, and it carries fresh fish that is caught from the coast about 100 miles away, and they ship all the fish by truck to this train waiting in this small Norwegian Arctic town, and then the train goes all the way down south to Oslo, to their capital, so it crosses the whole country from north to south. Wow. And it brings tons and tons, up to 1,600 tons of fish in 40 cargo containers on this train. And as you can imagine, the Norwegian Arctic, we're talking about some serious winter weather, like I live up in Toronto. Yeah. It's nothing compared to the winter that they get up there. So it's as well a real feat of engineering to go through this landscape, and it goes up and over mountains as well, but it's got this incredibly precious cargo, because as time goes on, this is not frozen fish. They keep the fish fresh, but they keep it in these special containers, these special temperature-controlled containers. But still, as time goes on, every hour the fish loses value. So in terms of getting this product down to Oslo in time, I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars of cargo here, and the more they're delayed, the more of that money is not on the table. So wow. It's a really, really interesting journey that they take, and time is of the essence.
I'm looking at a clip right now, and I think that's you and somebody you're interviewing, looking at model trains and then showing the interior of the actual train that you're looking at a model of. That is cool.
That's right. What? Yeah, that's the Canadian. Yeah.
Where did you stay? I mean, were you in a seat, or did you have one of those rooms where you could actually open up a bed?
Yeah, we on the Canadian we stayed for 4 nights on the actual train. So they have these wonderful sleeper cars, and they range from the more affordable ones to the kind of super luxury ones. I was in a more affordable one, predictably. But nonetheless, it's fantastic accommodation. Like, it's a really great way to travel and to be able to sleep, and sleeping in these train in these cars in your own room at night, you can kind of keep the window open and you can watch the world go by, or you'll go over a mountain and then you'll see the lights of a small town in the distance. It really is quite.
Oh my gosh, that's just quite nice.
Beautiful.
Well, I can't wait to do it, but I love being able to do it vicariously through the magic of media, the TV or the internet or whatever. The show is called Mighty Trains. It premieres this Sunday, September 3rd. Can you believe it's September already?
I know.
I cannot.
On the Smithsonian Channel. Teddy Wilson is the host, and gosh, you got a great gig. That's a great gig right there.
Honestly, I was sore after every trip because I was pinching myself so much,
Oh, okay.
I pinched myself every day on this working on this show, because I love trains and I love travel, and so it really is a dream gig, and I hope we kind of are able to show viewers at least some of how amazing and astounding these trains and these journeys are, and I hope you like the show.
And I do have a few friends that live up in Canada, and some of the trains that go there, that's how people get their groceries.
It absolutely is. You talk about trains as a lifeline, and the Canadian up here is one of the trains around the world that really exemplifies that. As you said before, I mean, people can actually request this train to stop in their small villages, even if there's not a preset stop there. And people do use it to get groceries, So it really connects remote villages. Up here it's kind of known as the train that helped build our country. And rail travel and rail lines are as important for all of you in the States as well. In terms of connecting communities.
Tell Donald Trump. Really Tell important. Donald Trump. Do not take away the Amtrak.
I'm going to call him next.
Good. And you have great credentials for getting guests, because you co-host the Inner Space. I mean, you've talked to the cast of Doctor Who, George Lucas, Stan Lee, Game of Thrones. I mean, gosh, you really have connections. So maybe you can help.
I'm a very lucky dude. I also like to geek out about traditional geeky things like science fiction and stuff. So, but cool. Trains are a real real love of mine, and it sounds like you guys are really into them too.
We are.
Your speaking voice has a smile in it, and I love that, Teddy. Thank you for being on our show with us, and good luck with the show. And I'm jealous. I want to do this, Robin.
I
want to
do it. Well,
thank you, Teddy.
Thank you, Larry and Robin. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
That was fun. We will be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Chris Foster. It's not just Houston flooded by Tropical Storm Harvey. Port Arthur, Texas, Mayor Derek Freeman says most houses there have water in them.
Wherever you are, please get to high ground. We will get to you.
A civic center being used as a shelter in Port